I never thought goodbye could feel so silent. Emily had always been loud. Her laughter filled the rooms we shared. Her voice was the soundtrack of my days. But that evening, it wasn't her laughter that greeted me. It was a quiet emptiness that settled like fog across the apartment. I didn't notice him at first. He wasn't supposed to be here, not in my life, not in my apartment, not in my story. And yet there he was, leaning casually against the doorway, a faint smile playing on his lips like he knew secrets I had yet to learn. His name was Noah. And I realized too late that I'd been giving pieces of myself away without even noticing. I remember the day we met as if it were yesterday. Emily had dragged me to a small art gallery in downtown Seattle. I wasn't much for art. At least that's what I told myself. But she insisted. She said the colors made her feel alive, and she wanted me to feel alive with her. That day, I watched her laugh at a painting so absurdly abstract that I couldn't even tell what it was supposed to be. I smiled at her, embarrassed by my own ignorance, and she leaned over and whispered, "You're sweet, even when you're clueless." That's how it started. A tiny spark that I mistook for ordinary friendship, ordinary love, ordinary life. Life has a way of tricking you. Over the years, Emily and I built a rhythm. Predictable but comforting. Every Sunday she made pancakes. Every Tuesday she complained about work while I tried not to laugh too loud. Every Friday she pulled me to dance in the living room, even when my two left feet protested. But then slowly things began to change. The little jokes I loved telling, the touches that once made her smile, she began to flinch. Her laughter didn't reach her eyes anymore. I asked myself if I was imagining it, if I was overreacting. But deep down I knew. I knew something or someone was taking her attention, taking her heart while I stood there thinking we were fine. Noah wasn't the typical type to walk into a story and steal a heart. But that's exactly what he did. He had this calm certainty, the kind of confidence that doesn't need to prove itself. He worked with Emily at the publishing house downtown, though I never thought much about it until the texts started appearing late at night, until her smile, that smile that was once mine, until I realized she was falling into a rhythm I wasn't part of anymore. And I kept pretending I didn't see it. I kept pretending everything was normal because the idea that the woman I loved could drift away so quietly felt impossible. I tried to hold on. I cooked dinners I knew she liked. I listened to her complaints about coworkers. I even took the Saturday shift at the cafe near our apartment so she could sleep in. I thought love was about effort, about showing up, about small sacrifices that built trust. But sometimes effort isn't enough. Sometimes the person you give your heart to doesn't want it in the same way anymore. That was the night it all came crashing down. She told me she was tired, just tired. Her eyes, usually vibrant and warm, were distant, almost glazed over, like she was somewhere else entirely. I reached for her hand, the one that had once fit perfectly in mine, and she pulled away so quickly it felt like my skin had been burned. "I just need space," she said, her voice hollow. Space. A word that felt bigger than our apartment, bigger than the life we had built, bigger than the love I thought we had. And then he was there, Noah, standing in the background, that same faint smile on his face. I watched as she leaned into him. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally. Every word she spoke to him, every laugh that wasn't for me was like a dagger. I had always thought our relationship was strong, unshakable. A fortress built of shared memories and whispered promises. But walls crumble when someone else finds the cracks first. I didn't react. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I didn't beg her to stay. I just sat there frozen, trying to process that the woman I loved had slowly placed her heart somewhere else. Then she looked at me. Really looked at me, with that faint, almost apologetic smile, and whispered, "I didn't mean for it to happen this way." That's when I realized there is no gentle way for a heart to break. There is no soft landing for the realization that the person you trusted most has quietly walked into someone else's arms, while leaving you behind. I packed my bag that night. Not in anger, not in defiance, but in quiet clarity. I needed to remove myself from the weight of something I couldn't fix. The taxi ride felt like floating away from my own life. A surreal blur of city lights and reflections in wet asphalt. Every turn of the cab's wheels echoed the words I could barely admit to myself. She had taken my heart, and I hadn't noticed until it was gone. And yet, amidst the ache, there was a strange sense of awareness, an unknowing that some doors closed to open others. I didn't know where this path would lead or whether my heart would ever feel whole again. All I knew was that tonight, everything had changed. Noah wasn't just a presence. He was a line drawn through my life, a marker where love ended and reality began. And as the city blurred past the window, I realized that the quietest departures often leave the loudest echoes. The next morning, I woke up in a small, unfamiliar apartment in Portland. My heart still throbbed from the night before. The memory of Emily's quiet withdrawal lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. I didn't know what I expected: anger, relief, closure. All I felt was a strange numbness, like walking through fog. I knew I had to face the truth. She had chosen a path without me, and I had no power to stop it. But there was something else simmering beneath the surface, a quiet determination I hadn't felt in years. I returned to our apartment later that day, not to beg or fight, but to collect the pieces of the life we had built. Each room was a museum of memories. Photographs of vacations, ticket stubs from movies, little notes we'd left for each other. I touched the objects carefully, as if handling fragile glass. And then I saw it. A small folded note lying on the kitchen counter, her handwriting unmistakable. My hand shook as I picked it up. "I never meant to hurt you," it read. I just didn't know how else to be honest with myself. The words were simple, almost innocent, but they carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken nights. I realized then that this wasn't just about Noah or anyone else. It was about Emily discovering herself, about the part of her heart I hadn't been able to reach. And though that understanding didn't erase the pain, it gave me a strange clarity. I spent the next few days walking the city streets, revisiting old haunts, replaying memories in my mind. Every cafe, every park bench, every quiet corner held echoes of her laughter. And yet, amidst the grief, there was a subtle awakening. I noticed things I hadn't before. The warmth of strangers' smiles, the quiet beauty of the river at dawn, the little details of life I had taken for granted while focusing solely on the fracture in my own world. Then, unexpectedly, I ran into Noah. It wasn't by chance. He was leaving the apartment complex as I was walking past. Our eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. There was no animosity, no rage, just a silent acknowledgement, a passing recognition that the three of us were now strangers in a story we once shared. Noah nodded politely, and I returned the gesture. It was strange, almost surreal, to face the person who had unwittingly become part of my heartbreak, and not feel the searing anger I thought I would. Weeks passed, and the edges of my grief began to dull. I started reconnecting with friends I had neglected, taking up old hobbies, exploring corners of the city I had never bothered to see. Each small act was a reminder that life didn't stop when love did. One evening, while sitting at a small rooftop cafe, I realized something profound. Emily had taken my heart, yes, but in leaving, she had also given me something I hadn't recognized. The chance to reclaim myself. And then came the call I hadn't anticipated. Emily's voice, hesitant and breaking on the other end of the line. I need to talk," she said. The words were heavy with regret, but also with a vulnerability I hadn't heard in months. I paused, letting the silence stretch, weighing the impulse to hang up against the instinct to listen. We met at a quiet park where the autumn leaves drifted like fragments of memory around us. She looked different, lighter, yet somehow distant. Noah wasn't there, and it struck me how much space he had occupied in her life, and how little power he had over mine. We sat on a bench, the silence between us thick, until she finally spoke. "I didn't realize how much I was hurting you," she said, her eyes glistening. "I thought I was finding something new, but I only lost sight of what we had. I never meant to break your heart." I listened without interrupting, letting the words wash over me. Then I spoke, quietly but with a strength that surprised even me. "Emily, what's done is done. You've made your choices and I've made mine. I won't lie, it hurt. Still does. But I can't give you the power to dictate my life anymore. I need to move forward without looking back." Her lips trembled and she nodded, understanding without argument. There was no bitterness in my voice, no recrimination, just clarity. And for the first time since that night, I felt a sense of peace. The kind of peace that comes not from reconciliation, but from acceptance. The understanding that some stories end not with fireworks, but with quiet dignity, with the realization that letting go is sometimes the only way to reclaim yourself. In the weeks that followed, I found new routines, new joys, new ways to feel whole. I still thought of Emily, of course. Memories don't vanish overnight. But I noticed that each recollection carried less sting and more tenderness, as if time had begun to smooth the jagged edges of heartbreak. And in that quiet, reflective space, I discovered something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. Freedom not from love, but from dependence on someone else's choices to define my own happiness. The final piece of closure came one evening months later, when I passed by our old apartment building. The lights were on in what used to be her place, laughter echoing faintly. I smiled, a soft, knowing smile. She had moved on, and so had I. But more importantly, I realized that no one had truly taken my heart. I had been the keeper of it all along. And in learning to hold it for myself, to protect it and nurture it, I had discovered something far more enduring than love given and lost. I had discovered resilience and the quiet strength of standing alone, unshaken, unafraid, and entirely whole.